All right. Welcome everyone to another deep dive. And this one, I gotta say, is a real doozy. We're gonna be digging into some pretty strange stuff. We've got old news clippings, we've got bits and pieces from Stephen King's Dreamcatcher, even some personal accounts. And the weird thing is they all seem to connect back to some really bizarre happenings up in the Maine woods.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these sources, they span decades, but they seem to hint at a single narrative, something hidden just below the surface. That's what we're going to try and uncover today.
That's right, like someone scattered puzzle pieces
Yes.
across time, and we're here to put them together. So why don't we start with these newspaper clippings? We've got some from the 60s and 70s. Like, check this out. The Manchester Union leader in 1965, they reported on this huge food poisoning outbreak in Plaistow, New Hampshire. Hundreds of people got sick. And get this, the FDA couldn't figure out what caused it. Doesn't that seem a little strange?
It's definitely peculiar, the FDA not being able to pin down a source. It points to something out of the ordinary, something they just couldn't explain conventionally. Makes you wonder, was it just incompetence or was something else going on? Maybe a cover-up.
Right. You start thinking, what were they hiding? And then, same year, we've got the Michigan Journal reporting on President Gerald Ford. Can you believe this? He actually called for a UFO investigation. Said those strange lights people were seeing in Michigan might be extraterrestrial.
Ford's statement, it carries a lot of weight. A high-ranking political figure publicly acknowledging UFOs, it lends credibility to the idea that something unusual was happening. It challenges the idea that UFOs were just a fringe theory?
Yeah, like maybe there's something to this whole UFO thing, right?
Yeah.
And get this, just to pile on the weirdness, a 1978 Los Angeles Times article reports that scientists from Caltech, they saw this massive, disc-shaped object out in the Mojave Desert. So many unexplained events all around the same time. Do you think it's all connected or just a coincidence?
Hard to believe it's just coincidence, especially when you consider how these events are close in time and location to what we see in Dreamcatcher. This clustering of unexplained phenomena makes you think, was there a cover-up? Were they trying to downplay what was happening?
Okay, so let's talk Dreamcatcher. Stephen King, he sets up this really eerie scene. Four friends, Jonesy, Beaver, Pete, and Henry, they're on their annual hunting trip in the Maine woods. Then they run into the strange guy named McCarthy.
McCarthy, his condition is what intrigues me. He's disoriented, has stomach pains, and he's missing teeth, but he doesn't even realize it. These symptoms, especially when you add in his talk of dry lightning in the middle of winter, make you think, was he exposed to something extraterrestrial?
Yeah, and don't forget, he also thinks it's Sunday when it's actually Wednesday. Like, his sense of time is totally messed up.
Yeah.
Definitely not your average lost hiker.
Right, his sense of time and self is totally distorted. Maybe it's trauma, but considering the news clippings and the remote location, you have to wonder, is there a more extraordinary explanation?
Yeah.
Could it be connected?
This is where the story gets seriously creepy. They find this strange fungus growing near their cabin, and it's like nothing they've ever seen before. It's invasive, almost like it's alive. King uses fungus in a lot of his work, but what do you think this virus represents in this context?
The virus, this rapidly growing invasive fungus, it's a powerful symbol, don't you think? It represents this fear of the unknown, something that can get inside you and corrupt your mind and body. And if you think about McCarthy's potential exposure to something unexplained, maybe the virus is a byproduct of that, something alien, something dangerous.
It's like a physical manifestation of all this fear and paranoia, right?
Yeah.
And then, as if things weren't creepy enough, the government shows up. Heavily armed soldiers, helicopters, a quarantine zone. They're even using code names. Ripley and Virus. Feels like a cover-up, doesn't it?
The government's response, so secretive, so forceful, it definitely raises some red flags. Makes you wonder what they know, what they're hiding. Are they really trying to protect people, or are they just trying to maintain control?
And in the middle of all this is Duditz Cavell, a young man with Down syndrome who's best friends with the group. What's interesting is he seems to be super sensitive to whatever's going on. Like he can sense things the others can't. He's got this deep connection with his friends.
Duddits, his character is so important to this story. He represents innocence and purity, and his sensitivity to the alien presence, maybe that's a different way of seeing the world, a way that's often ignored.
Yeah, like he's tuned into something that most people miss.
Hmm.
And then there are the personal accounts. These are like whispers, little pieces of information corroborating what we see in Dreamcatcher. People talking about strange lights, military activity, hushed-up stories.
These accounts, even though they're fragmented, they ground the story in reality, make the idea of an extraterrestrial event even more unsettling. They blur the line between fiction and reality, forcing us to ask, Could what we dismiss as fantasy actually be closer to the truth?
It's like Kim took real-world events and anxieties and spun them into this chilling story, and now it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. It's really unsettling. What is it about these events, real or fictional, that makes them so disturbing, do you think?
It's our primal fears, I think. Fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, fear of being invaded by something we don't understand. These stories, they make us feel vulnerable, like we're not as in control as we think we are.
It's that feeling of vulnerability that gets you, right?
Yeah.
The idea that we're not at the top of the food chain. And trust me, this is just the beginning. Things are about to get a whole lot weirder.
And as we get deeper into this, the government's actions, they become even more disturbing. Like they're saying they're protecting the public, but their actions just don't match up.
I totally agree. The more we learn about what they did, the more it feels like control and suppression were more important than actually helping people.
Right. They set up this quarantine zone, but instead of like providing aid and support, they use force and intimidation, using the military against potentially infected civilians. That brings up some serious ethical questions.
It's chilling, really. It shows how quickly power can be abused, especially when fear is involved. And don't forget those code names, Ripley and Virus. Turns out Ripley refers to the alien entity itself, and Virus is that terrifying fungus.
Ripley. That choice is really interesting. It's a direct reference to Ellen Ripley from the Alien movies. It suggests that even the government sees the parallels, between what's happening and those nightmarish scenarios in science fiction.
Like they're subconsciously admitting that our worst fears might be coming true. And the virus itself, it's like something straight out of a horror movie, growing so fast, consuming everything in its path, and it seems to mess with people's minds, too.
The virus adds a whole other dimension to the threat. It's not just a physical invasion, but a psychological one. It can manipulate and control people, turning them into puppets. It really makes you question what it means to be human, If your mind can be hijacked, what's left?
That's a scary thought. It completely undermines who we are, our sense of self. And it gets worse. The virus doesn't just infect people, it absorbs their memories, their personalities. You end up with these copies. The physical form is there, but the essence of the person is gone.
It's like the virus represents loss, not just of life, but of identity. It steals who you are, leaving behind an empty shell. And that makes the government's use of force even more tragic. Are they fighting infected humans or something else wearing a human mask? How can you even tell the difference?
Yeah, it's a moral dilemma with no easy answers. It's about that tension between protecting society and respecting individual lives, even when those lives have been changed. And all of this is happening while people are just trying to survive. The story reaches this intense climax where the infected people, driven by the virus, are trying to escape the quarantine zone.
You can feel their desperation. They're not mindless, They're trapped inside this alien consciousness, but they want to break free to warn others. But the government, they're so afraid, so obsessed with control that they just see them as enemies that need to be eliminated.
It really makes you wonder who the real monsters are in this situation, right? Is it the infected people who are being controlled, or the people in power who are willing to sacrifice anything to stay in control?
Right. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about good and evil, heroes and villains. The lines are blurred. And then there's Deditz. He's still connected to his friends, even though they're trapped inside the virus. He's the only one who understands them, who sees their struggle.
He's like this beacon of empathy in the middle of all the fear and violence. His innocence, his purity, it stands out against the government's brutality and the aliens' manipulation. Deditz represents the power of love and connection, even in the face of something horrible.
He shows us a different way of looking at the world. One that isn't based on fear or power, but on understanding and compassion. He makes us look deeper, see the humanity, even in those who seem monstrous.
And then the story takes this wild turn. We're suddenly inside the mind of the alien entity. It's taken over Jonesy, one of the friends who was infected.
That shift in perspective is brilliant. It allows us to see the world through the eyes of the other. We learn that this entity, it calls itself Mr. Gray, and it's powerful, but also kind of naive. He's driven by this instinct to spread, to seed the planet. But he doesn't understand what that really means.
He's like a force of nature, acting on instinct, not realizing the damage he's causing. But Jonesy, even though he's trapped inside, he's fighting back. He's using his knowledge of humans, his understanding of his friends, to try and outsmart this powerful entity.
It's a psychological battle, a fight for control of Jonesy's body, his mind, his identity. It raises questions about free will, resistance, and whether even something alien can be affected by human connection.
It's like this huge fight is happening on this tiny level, a battle for the planet playing out inside one person's mind. What's amazing is Jonesy doesn't give up. Even against this enemy that seems unbeatable, he finds a way to resist.
It shows the strength of the human spirit. We don't give in easily. And that's what gives him a chance, a small chance, to change things.
So we've got this internal struggle, this desperate attempt to stop Mr. Gray from the inside. But what about the external threat? What's the government doing about all of this?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. They're working with bad information, and they're about to make a move that could be catastrophic. They still think they're dealing with just one infected person. They have no idea what they're really up against.
Sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. They're completely unprepared. And meanwhile, Henry and Owen are trying to reach Jonesy, guided by Deadit's psychic connection.
It's a race against time, and the stakes are incredibly high. If they can't reach Jonesy, if Mr. Gray succeeds, it could be the end of humanity as we know it.
It feels like we're on the edge of a cliff. We've got this fight for control, this race against time, and the government is about to make a huge mistake.
It definitely creates a feeling of dread, like everything's about to fall apart. But even with all that darkness, there's still a little bit of hope. Maybe, just maybe, love and connection can win out against chaos and destruction.
Sounds like the final part of this deep dive is going to be intense.
Yeah.
Will Jonesy hold on long enough? Can Duddit's love make a difference? Can humanity survive this? So, where we left off, things were looking pretty grim. Mr. Gray, this ancient, powerful being, he's headed to the Quabbin Reservoir, and his plan, to seed it with the virus, contaminate the water supply for millions.
You know, the Quabbin Reservoir, it's not a random target. Mr. Gray chose it for a reason. It shows he understands our infrastructure, and he doesn't care about the consequences. He's using our own systems against us.
And the scary part is the government's clueless. They think Jonesy's the only problem. They have no idea what they're really dealing with.
And their ignorance is actually making things worse. They're working with bad intel, making decisions that could be disastrous. It's like even the most powerful institutions can be helpless when they don't understand what they're up against.
So it's a race against time.
Yeah.
Jonesy fighting Mr. Gray from the inside. Henry and Owen trying to reach him before he gets to the reservoir, all guided by Duddits. Speaking of Henry and Owen, where do they fit into all of this? What are they up to while Jonesy's fighting this mental battle?
Well, Henry, he's got this strong connection with Jonesy, and with Duddits guiding him, he's trying desperately to find his friend. He knows Jonesy's their only chance of stopping Mr. Gray.
It's amazing how Duddits is the key here. His abilities, the things that society often dismisses, are what make him so important. He can see what others can't, connect with people on a deeper level.
Exactly. And Owen, even though he starts off skeptical, he's drawn in by his loyalty to Henry and the realization that something really bad is happening. They're both ordinary guys facing this extraordinary situation.
But how are they supposed to fight something like Mr. Gray? They're not superheroes or alien hunters.
That's what's so interesting about their story, though. They're everyday people, but they're facing this incredible challenge. They don't have special powers or weapons, just their friendship, their loyalty, and their belief in something bigger than themselves.
It reminds you that sometimes the best weapons are the ones we already have. Compassion, courage, standing up for what you believe in, even when it seems impossible. But they still need to find Jonesy, right? Before it's too late.
Yeah, the clock is ticking. But here's the thing. As Mr. Gray is driving Jonesy toward the reservoir, he gets distracted. He starts experiencing things through Jonesy's memories and senses, bacon, music, the beauty of the snow. He's experiencing it all for the first time.
Wait, so you're saying Jonesy's trying to distract an alien with bacon and music? That's either genius or insane.
It's a risky move, that's for sure. Jonesy's using human experience as a weapon. He's trying to make Mr. Gray question things, to make him curious, maybe even awaken some empathy in this ancient being.
He's using Mr. Gray's naivete against him. But can something as simple as bacon or music really change the mind of something driven by basic instincts?
That's the big question. It makes you think about the power of human connection. Can even the most alien being be moved by beauty, joy, those simple things that make us human?
It's a hopeful idea, especially when we're surrounded by so much division and conflict. It suggests that there's something that connects us all, something that goes beyond our differences. But does it actually work? Can Jonesy change Mr. Gray's mind?
Well, for a while it seems like it might. Mr. Gray, he's genuinely fascinated by these new experiences, but he's also ancient and powerful, driven by instincts that have been around for millions of years. It's this constant battle between Jonesy's manipulation and Mr. Gray's need to seed the planet.
So it's a battle for Mr. Gray's very being. Can these near-human experiences overcome his basic nature? But time's running out, and something tells me the government's about to make things a whole lot worse.
You're right. The government, they still think Jonesy's the only problem. They decide to take him out before he reaches the reservoir. They send a sniper, completely unaware that they're playing right into Mr. Gray's hands.
Talk about unintended consequences. They think they're protecting people, but they're making things worse.
It just shows how dangerous it is to act without all the facts, to let fear and prejudice guide your decisions. The government's decision, it makes sense from their limited point of view, but it's a terrible mistake.
So the tension is building. Jonesy's fighting Mr. Gray, Henry and Owen are racing to reach him, and the government's about to make a deadly error. What happens next?
Just when it seems like all hope is lost, Jonesy, he reaches out to Henry through a dream. It's Duddit's psychic link that makes it possible. This connection gives them both hope, and they realize they have to work together to stop Mr. Gray. And Duddit's. He's the key.
Again, Duddit's abilities are what save the day. The things that society misunderstands are what make him so powerful.
His innocence, his pure heart, they become the weapons they need. They realize that Duddit's love for his friends, his empathy, might be the only thing strong enough to beat Mr. Gray.
So we come down to the final showdown. Jonesy, Henry, Owen, and Duddits up against this powerful alien. What are their chances?
It doesn't look good. But as Mr. Gray gets closer to the reservoir, the fight inside him gets worse. The need to seed the planet and these new human feelings he's experiencing, they're tearing him apart. He's losing control.
So Jonesy's plan is working. He's using Mr. Gray's own emotions against him. He's turned empathy into a weapon.
Exactly. And as Mr. Gray's falling apart, Henry and Owen, with Duddits leading the way, they finally reach Jonesy. And the sniper, he's in position, ready to take the shot.
This is it. Everything comes down to this moment. The fight for Jonesy's mind and body and the fate of the world hangs in the balance.
Mr. Gray, he can't handle it anymore. He crashes the car, Jonesy's hurt, broken, and he's losing his hold on Mr. Gray. This is their chance.
If Henry and Owen can just reach Jonesy, if Duddits can use his love to weaken Mr. Gray.
They get to the crash site, and Mr. Gray, he's desperate. He tries to get away with Jonesy's broken body. There's a fight, a desperate struggle against this thing that's both alien and strangely familiar. The sniper, he sees it all, and he hesitates. He doesn't know what to do.
It's about survival, about Jonesy's soul, and the sniper has to make a choice. Follow orders or trust his gut.
And then Duddit steps in. He reaches out to Jonesy with all the love in his heart. It strengthens Jonesy and weakens Mr. Gray's control.
Duddit's love, it's like a light in the darkness showing them the way back.
Exactly. And at that moment, Jonesy takes back control. He pushes Mr. Gray out of his body, breaks the connection, and ends the threat.
He did it. He actually beat Mr. Gray. But what about Duddits? Is he okay?
No, he's not. Duddits, he used all his strength to save his friend, and he dies peacefully in Henry's arms. It's a reminder of what it costs to be brave and loving, of the power that lies in those who are often ignored.
It's sad. But it shows how much one person can do, how much impact they can have, even if they face challenges. Duddit saves his friends, he saves so many lives, and he reminded us of the power of love and sacrifice.
His death, it really highlights the themes of King's story. The power of human connection, the fight between good and evil, the hope that exists even in the darkest times, and how those who love and sacrifice leave a mark on the world.
What an incredible journey. We started with news clippings and a fictional story. We ended up talking about human nature, the limits of what we know, and the power of love in the face of true horror. It's amazing how these things, when you put them together, create something so powerful and moving.
It shows you the power of stories. They can help us understand ourselves, challenge what we believe, and make us look deeper. King mixes reality and fiction to make us confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about power, and about the choices we make when we face the unknown.
And maybe the biggest takeaway is that even in the darkest times, there's always hope. Love, compassion, the courage to stand up for what you believe in, these things can help us overcome anything. Duddit's sacrifice reminds us that strength can come from unexpected places.
What if we accept the possibility of life beyond Earth? What does that mean for us? And if a story like this could be real even a little bit, are we ready for what that means? These are the questions that stay with you, making you question what you thought you knew and look for the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring these questions, keep looking into the unknown, and never stop searching for the amazing things hidden in everyday life.